I've had this experience. You've probably had something similar, and it's that sense of connection of not being completely isolated and alone, which I think what certainly I seek. That's why you get into film, is because, the first time, for example, I saw Anvil play at Sunset and Sunset at Sundance, we were no one really had seen the film, apart from Sundance programmers.
This episode is brought to you by the best-selling book, Rise of the Film Entrepreneur, How to Turn Your Independent Film into a Money-Making Business. Learn more at filmbizbook.com. I'd like to welcome back to the show, returning champion, Sacha Gervasi. Sacha.
I have no idea what's going on this morning, Alex, but we've just been talking for 10 minutes. We're just laughing. So hopefully people will forgive us for just being somewhat ridiculous. And,
this conversation is going to be somewhat ridiculous. That I can promise you without question.
What's new, Alex?
So, my friend, for people who don't, you could come on a while ago on Indie Film Hustle and on Bulletproof Screenwriting. And we talked about your career writing The Terminal and writing, directing My Dinner with Hervé and Hitchcock and many other films. But we're here today to talk about, honestly, what you'll be remembered for. Let's just put it out there. On your gravestone, the man who brought Anvil.
I'm hoping I die on this podcast, so that will really be true.
That's going to boost the ratings. I'll give you that.
It's going to be good for you.
It's only going to be good for me.
There is no doubt that Anvil, Anvil will be on my tombstone with "I told you I was ill."
That's a fantastic. I told you I was ill. So tell everybody the story of Anvil, because when we first spoke, you had so many other highlights of your career that I wanted to kind of dig into, that I didn't realize there was like an 8-foot poster behind you as we were speaking of the story of Anvil. And I think
as we've been gearing up to this release, people just want to talk about Anvil. It's like, I'm working on The Crown right now. No one's interested. They want to focus on Anvil and Lips and Rob. And, the story is very simple. I was a fan of this band Anvil. At 15, I met them at the Marquee in London. I showed them around London and they invited me to come on tour with them as a drum roadie. And so I was a 15, 16-year-old kid running around doing a Canadian hockey arena tour in like the summer of 1985. And that was the time of sort of Live Aid. And so I was, there, set up Rob Reiner's drums at Metal Aid in Albany, New York. Not quite as glamorous, but it was pretty funny. Notable for the fact that the lead guitar player of the Scorpions came into the dressing room and said, "Who is Africa?" He thought it was a benefit show for a person called Africa. And someone had to point out, actually, Matthias, it's a continent. Anyway, so this was the kind of shit that was going on regularly, and I was just around for all this kind of like 80s metal stuff. But I was a kid, and I was so in love with Anvil, and particularly the drummer Rob Reiner. His real name is Rob Reiner. People think that that's one of the reasons the movie is not real.
Spinal Tap
is the director of Spinal Tap and the drummer of Anvil have the same name, but the reality is that's really his name. And so it began this journey for me that obviously continues now, 45, 50 years later or whatever it is. And it's just extraordinary with the films about to come out again into theaters nationwide.
Which we're going to get into that story. So that's the basis of the story. So for everybody listening, Anvil is this amazing story of how not to follow. Not how to follow your dreams, but also how not to follow your dreams and never give up, because there has to be a persistence. And since this is a podcast about artists and filmmakers and things like that, being an artist is not easy. Being a creative is not easy in any field you get into. This film is one of those films that touches your heart for anybody who's ever tried to do something and have been told no 1,000 times. But they should have stopped.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Years ago. This is about two guys who, when they were 14, they made a pact to rock together forever. Here we are more than 50 years later, and the band's still doing it. And they haven't sold millions of records and, played Wembley and done all this stuff that one associates with a successful rock band. But what they have done is recorded 19 albums, kept touring, kept working, given up their day jobs. Their full-time gig is being in Anvil. And it is, as you said, about persistence. It's this extraordinary story about what happens when you refuse to give up on your dreams. You just refuse. You're like, I don't care. I'm not getting the results. I'm not getting the money, but I'm just going to keep doing it. And somehow, if you just hang on, some young fan from 30 years ago comes into your life and makes a movie about the struggle. And that movie in itself, has completely propelled the band as well, has really helped the band, because people have identified with, as you said, what it means to be an artist, what it really means to be an artist for most artists, right? It's very, very hard. And so I think this was sort of one of the intention of the movie was for people to really appreciate the kind of, not just the dedication and commitment of not having the money and the success and the fame and all that stuff, but what it's about for them, but also the dedication and the support required from their families. A big part of the movie is interviewing the wives, is talking to the sister who plays a big role in the film, is what is the impact, what is the cost of refusing to give up your dreams? That's what the film is essentially about. And I think in a strange way, it's resonated because for most artists, this is some version of their life. In other words, it's really hard. Maybe you have a moment of great success, maybe it passes, maybe you have another one. But, for most artists, they do it because they love doing the thing. And they do it for reasons of passion and because they have to, because that's who they are. And, sometimes you get the fame and the money, sometimes you get it briefly, in the case of Anvil, but the point being that everyone can relate to this film. And I think the really shocking thing to me, because it's so, Anvil is not, the heavy metal music is not something that most people listen to, certainly not in the mainstream anymore. And it sort of, the film seems to have resonated beyond the heavy metal and rock community to any creative artist. So we've, over the years, I've had letters from, long distance cyclists and potters. And, our friend Rich Roll is one of the biggest advocates of the film. Just people who really just recognize that universal story of struggling to do something you believe in and it not working and being so committed and so passionate about it that you just don't care. You just go like, screw it, I'm just going to keep going. And I think it's about the human spirit in the film ultimately. And it comes served up in a really quite unexpected package with Lips and Rob, and at the beginning of the movie, you're kind of laughing at them going, oh my God, these Canadian headbangers, they're just so weird and crazy. But by the end, I think, if the movie works for you, you feel a sense of empathy and compassion, and you feel a sense of admiration, because because these guys are really doing it for the real reasons. They're not doing it because they're famous, and ironically, of course, that this story, which is essentially about not giving up and about, in one sense, failure, some might say, but it has a happy ending, and that happy ending continues because they've been rewarded somehow. It's just been it's been extraordinary. Anyway, you can ask me anything. But
it's really fascinating because that's what I was when I saw the film for the first time in this in the most ideal way you can watch that film at your house in your screening room on a 35 millimeter print for the first time, and you're telling us stories about what happened on the set and things like that after the movie. That was the first time I got to see it, and I was crying at the end. I mean, I was literally tearing up because it connected with me at a really almost spiritual level because all of us have gone through that struggle of trying to make it. So, two questions. One, how did you deal with your own rejections coming up in the business? Because I know the road wasn't paved with gold for you, as it isn't for most artists who've made any sort of significant career, made a career of themselves. And two, after that, can you tell the story of how Anvil was birthed, the original phone call, like why you even got the idea to do Anvil in the first place? And like that whole story is fascinating. But first, how do you deal with and I'm assuming you still get no's. We all still get no's.
I mean, listen, here's the reality, man. You can have some success and have made films that have been popular or work with, incredible people or whatever. You're still going to get failure and rejection. That's the thing people don't realize. I think people on the outside of the business think, once I get my first movie made or I sell my first script, frankly, that's just making it to the battlefield. That's where the battle begins. It's an absolute miracle. It's a great thing to sell a script and to have a movie made, but there's so many just the war continues, the pitfalls, the potholes, the unexpected ups and downs, the kind of someone decides to market the movie wrong or release it on the wrong date, or the actor's not right, or you know what I mean, like the most brilliant spec script in the world that if it's cast wrong and made wrong, it doesn't work as a movie. It's like there are so many things that need to go right. So you continue to encounter those. I think, in my own experience, you continue to encounter that all the time. So, but the thing is that I think when you have pulled off a few things, you get some sense of confidence that even if you get a rejection or it doesn't work out, you're like, okay, we'll figure out another way. You have the faith that perhaps you don't have if you haven't had anything go right. You know what I mean? Like if you've had some things go right, then you're like, oh, okay, so there will be a way.
And then your origin story of how you got the Terminal, essentially when you got the Terminal, how it was based purely on a short film script.
Well, no, you mean Hervé? Hervé was.
Hervé, yes. Yeah. That whole story is. But before you tell the story, the thing I love about that is that you wrote down something that was so authentic to you. You put it all out on the table there. And even the power of that little short clip is what kind of launched your career.
It totally did. I mean, I had been a journalist and I really did not like the very cynical 90s sort of newspaper culture in Britain, which, I mean, still to a degree continues today. But it was extremely cynical. And you could just see a whole bunch of kind of, people who found it much easier to sit on the sidelines being kind of shitty to other people and judging than actually, have the balls to take any kind of risk on their own. And I just was part of that culture. I was a young kid. I was sent on an assignment and I was sent to interview Hervé Villechaize, who at the time was a faded star, but had been the star of one of the biggest shows on American TV and in fact around the world in the early 80s called Fantasy Island. And so I was sent on this, interview, which was kind of like a side dish to the much more important things I was supposedly doing in LA. This was like, go and make fun of a dwarf and come back. And, there's that kind of thing. And I went in, frankly, filled with kind of judgment. I'd already written the story before I'd got there. And it was just like, take a few photos, ha, 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 Hervé Villechaize. And, there's actually a Vulture article about the real story, about my dinner with Hervé. Is it real? You can look it up on vulture.com, which tells my first person narrative of what that experience was like. And then obviously it was adapted to a film. And the first time I met him, he actually pulled a knife on me.
As one does,
because I'd written the story and I was rushing to get somewhere else, and it's all in the film, you'll see. And he kind of said, you're pathetic. You're not a reporter. You're not interested in the truth. You're just interested in trotting out the same old stereotypes and kind of screw you. So he pulled this knife to kind of like get my attention. And you know what? He was right. In the end, I spent 3 nights with him, 3 days, 3 nights. I can't remember, over 5 days between all my other interviews. And at the end, I just had such a completely different idea about who this person was versus who I thought they were. I looked at him as a 3'10" kind of French dwarf with this funny voice. Hello, how are you? All this stuff. And I just thought it was just surreal being with him. But when I got to know who that person actually was as a human being, what had gone on with his parents, how he'd been such an extraordinary artist, the youngest ever painter to have his work hung in the Museum of Paris as an 18-year-old. He was very well educated, extremely sharp, urbane, cosmopolitan, very funny, and also completely screwed up by the multiple rejections that had, happened throughout his life, and the primal rejection at a certain point of his mother. And I just felt such empathy for him. I was like, I really love this guy. But at the end, so we really connected, and he opened my eyes to my own kind of cynicism and judgment, which was really I needed. And so at the end, when we saw each other in Universal Sheraton, the scene is actually in the movie, and we shot it in the place where it happened. He leant down, and his eyes were filled with this incredibly tragic defiance and tears, and he said, tell them I regret nothing. It's actually in the movie, and Peter Dinklage does the scene so beautifully. And it was this thing of, I had his story. And when I went back to the newspaper, that no one was really interested in that story. They were interested in, all the other stuff. But what was really sad was 5 minutes after I left him in that lobby, I got a call from Kathy, his girlfriend, who in the movie is played by Mireille Enos, and to say that Hervé had committed suicide. that morning. And so I had this 11 or 12 recorded hours of interview with this kind of faded, forgotten star who people thought was a joke. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to do something where I'm going to try and honor this person. And I wrote this piece, and I went into the newspaper, and literally they said, and the line is in the film, one of the editors said, well, Gervasi's topped a midget. Where do we send him next? And they all started laughing. And I was just like, I get it, but actually you have no idea who this person is. Read this article. And they cut it down, and they just basically watered it down. And I realized that I had to tell this guy's story. I mean, basically 5 days before he died, I promised him that I would tell the story one way or another. And so I wrote, my first script was a short screenplay called My Dinner with Hervé, which was about this unexpected encounter with this sort of quote unquote joke celebrity, as they called him in the office. And, you know, that script was written from a place of the magazine's kind of ruined, you know, cut it down, and it just didn't feel right. And I just have to tell his story. So that it took me 25 years to make the film, which I did eventually, with Peter Dinklage starring as Hervé and Jamie Dornan in an amazing breakthrough performance, actually, which led to Belfast, and Andy Garcia and Harriet Walter and stuff. I mean, it was and David Strathairn, of course. So, you know, it was an extraordinary epic journey to get it made. But it was that story, that 34-page short script, was the one that eventually ended up finding Spielberg found it and hired me to do The Terminal with Tom Hanks after that. So it was it was an incredibly important moment in my life and it was all about just standing up and going, I'm going to tell this story properly in a way that is more personal and talk about how much this experience and this person actually affected me. And so that was My Dinner with Hervé. So yeah, it was the purity of it, was the refusal to just kowtow to the prevailing culture of kind of cynicism, right, and frankly, and stupidity. And you know, just people want to put, you know, like all the time. And we go through life, you know, life is fast. There's so much going on. We have to put people in a pigeonhole or put a situation. There's so much judgment. And so the point is, like, what if I just removed my judgment? What if I didn't have such a strong opinion about everything? You know, people use that in a way as a defense when they don't want to have to deal with something that's uncomfortable or unpleasant, which is fine. But so I kind of, it was how everything began for me, was that short script. And it was coming from a place of, I have to tell this story and I have to tell it.
And the thing that's fascinating about that story, and it's such a great example of what I've talked about all the time. People always ask me, how do you make it? How do you make it? What, you know, you've talked to so many, you know, screenwriters and filmmakers who've made it. Like, what's the secret? And I'm like, the secret is you. It's your secret sauce. It's the thing that nobody else on the planet has other than you. And if you're brave enough to show it, that's what brings success. And in your example, there is literally no one else on the planet that could tell that story.
Yeah, I had to. I think everything you say is exactly correct. It's like, what is the thing that's singular or unique to you? The experience you've had, maybe in a family, maybe in a work situation, maybe as an artist, whatever it is. What is that story whose perspective only you are able to provide and tell and explore? And there was no one else who could have told that story. And frankly, My Dinner with Hervé and Anvil, The Story of Anvil, are two examples of extremely personal stories. And actually both movies end with a photo of me and the subject.
That's true.
Because, you know, I think part of doing these movies is not to be successful, whatever that even means. It's to make sense of your own life. You know, you're trying to, it's like, what was all that about? You know, Anvil is partially, I was this 15-year-old fan who kind of ran away from home and joined the circus and went on the road with a heavy metal band, which my mother was not happy about, obviously. And it was like, what was all that about? In that case, it was the music, it was escape, it was growing up, it was becoming an individual, it was kind of going, screw you, you know, it was like the normal teenage stuff. And with Hervé, it was about putting something right in myself, forget the culture of the newspapers. It was like, oh, okay, so I was putting him in a pigeonhole and rushing to judge and being cynical. You know, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be a cynical person who's not open. to other people just because he happened to be 3'10". Anyway, so my point is that you sometimes you do a project, you write a script, you make a movie, you only realize after you've made it why you did it. And so, but you just have to follow that instinct. And as you say, do the thing that only you specifically can do. And those two photograph films, as I call them, because they end with that photo, one of me at the Lips of Anvil, one of me and Hervé. There's a third one coming, which there'll be 3 films eventually, after I do this other film. But those are the personal films, man, and those are the ones that resonate mostly with me, and I think also with other people. So that's just my own impression. But you got it, and I do them because I have something to express that I think it's important, that I think other people are going to recognize. We've all been cynical. We've all been wild and carefree and young and wanting to kind of go out into the world, which was the Anvil thing. It's like that. Those universal things are the reason I do stuff, because I want to connect with other people, because I want to say, I've had this experience. You probably had something similar, and it's that sense of connection, of not being completely isolated and alone, which I think, well, certainly I seek. That's why you get into film, is because, the first time, for example, I saw Anvil play at Sunset at Sundance, we were no one really had seen the film, apart from Sundance programmers, and they seemed to like it, but you never know until you put it in front of an audience. And we premiered it in the library, and that sense of the response afterwards, and when Lips and Rob came out, and there was incredible, overwhelming applause for them, and just a momentous reaction to the film. It's like, oh, okay. So all of that, the years of work and financing this movie myself, and going through all the ups and downs of trying to pull a film together, it was all worth it. Someone heard you, someone related. It meant something to someone. And I think I told this story to you. I don't know if I did, but after the premiere of Anvil, like 660 people came out of the library, and Anvil was sitting with a little van selling T-shirts and CDs in the snow, and like 600 people were like lining up to, and there was this really nice elderly lady, and she went up to Anvil and she was posing for photos, and she bought 3 copies of their CD, This Is 13. And as she was leaving, I went up to her with my producer, Rebecca Heller. I said, "Excuse me, madam, just out of interest, why did you buy 3 Anvil CDs? I mean, it doesn't seem like you're a heavy metal fan." She held them up and she said, "I will never listen to these, but I just want to help." And she was like a 70-something-year-old, school teacher in Park City. She was a school teacher who went to her local film festival, Sundance. And that's when we knew we had something. That's when we knew, okay, this movie is reaching people just as human beings, and that's what, you can't buy that kind of sense of excitement and relief and satisfaction, where the story you're trying to tell, the themes of the story, resonate with people, who you would never expect them to resonate with. That's a beautiful thing, because then me and that lady are connected, and we probably have nothing else in common, but somehow this movie created a connection. So I know it sounds hippie like, but I like that.
No, of course.
Film to reach people,
Yeah, it's not hippie at all. I mean, look, the thing that's so beautiful about Anvil is that even if you just watch the trailer, there's a level of that these guys are pathetic, that you're like, this is never going to happen. Like, you guys should stop. Their family is like, they should stop. It's over. Yeah. It was over years ago.
A long time ago.
They had their moment. They're in the movie, they're like 50 something at that point.
50. I mean, by the way, just so you know, the guy's now, Lips is 66, and he's still
rocking.
Yeah, and he's still going, and he'll go until
he dies on stage. Till he just dies on stage.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no question. But that's the thing that's so beautiful about this, because as a director and as a storyteller, you brought us in and really showed us the life of a failed artist, of 2 failed artists who won't let go, even though everything around them is saying, you're just not, it's not going to work, man. It's not going to happen for you.
Yeah.
And that's so difficult, because I think every artist at one point or another comes to that come to Jesus moment.
Yeah, of course.
Where you look in the mirror and you go, am I good enough to make a go of this? And then if the answer is no, they either get out and go get a real job, or they go, I'm going to give it 5 years. I'm going to give it 10 years.
Exactly.
And if it doesn't work, these guys gave it 20 odd years, 30 years, and they still were like,
but I think that's what I think is beautiful is like, if you're willing to really commit, if you're really, really willing to never give up, that's what it looks like. But if you never give up, it allows for the possibility of some kind of miracle to happen some way. And this movie was what happened to those guys. I didn't know what I was doing when I was making it. I think they had less clue. But, here we are. And when it came out the first time, I remember standing, AC/DC asked Anvil to open some of their stadium shows. And I remember standing on the stage at Giant Stadium and 50,000 people were screaming, Anvil, 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 And you could never have predicted that, and so it's just magic happens, when it's all over.
So let's talk about that magic, because you literally, so everyone understands, a 15-year-old roadie goes off to Hollywood, makes a go of it. He's doing all right, hanging out with Steven and Tom, and and he's building a career for himself. And then he goes, you know what? I wonder whatever happened to Anvil.
Yeah, that's
so
exactly.
Please pick up the story from there, because I was
like Hollywood, I'd had my first movie made with Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, or there was obviously good, amazing.
So if you could get that kind of work, it's fantastic.
No, it was amazing. No, and Tom and Steven were fantastic, and here, they were taking some young kid from London and giving him a chance to make a movie with them, which was, extremely rare and exceptional. I'll never forget that, because it created my career. And it gave me choices and options to go off and do things. And what an amazing gift. And I remember stepping onto the set of The Terminal for the first time. And I was just like, because I'd made a little movie at Warner Brothers called The Big Tease, which was my first film. And I remember Walter Parks, the producer, took me onto the set of Terminal, and he was holding my eyes. And he said, okay. And I opened, and I looked, and it was like a fully functioning airport. And it was like, the set of The Terminal had cost $16 million, I think, at the time, which was like 4 times the budget of my entire first movie. And I was just like, this was me sitting in a room, trying to get some story together based on this true story of Alfred Nasseri at Paris Airport, at Charles de Gaulle. And it was magic, when you realize that it's so hard to be a writer, it's so hard to be creative, but if you just hang out long enough and you keep going, then, and hundreds of people end up going to work, that's a good feeling, to feel like your creativity has employed a lot of people when you're on a set and you think, this came from me sitting there on my own. So that was a lovely thing, and it was a great experience for me. And Hanks was extraordinary, and I love Tom Hanks. So, and Stephen too. They were and remain wonderful. So, and then I had choices about what I wanted to do. And ironically, from that situation, I really thought, I want to be a director. And no one was going to give me a job to direct. But that was going on in my mind. And then also going on in my mind was, here I am, I've made a movie with Spielberg and Hanks, making a living doing, I'm sort of sitting in some Malibu beach house or whatever, and I was just thinking about life. And then I was like, God, whatever happened to Anvil? And I went online and I discovered, that band who I'd been on the road with and I'd known so well over those sort of from 1982, I first met them, to about 86. For those 4 or 5 years, I'd really known them very well and been out on 3 tours. And, so I looked them up and I discovered that they were still going and that they'd done like 10 albums I'd never heard of. And they were playing a pub in Quebec. And there are all these photos from their last show at this pub. And anyway, I wrote to the website and I said, dear website manager for Anvil, I'm an old friend. Anyway, an hour later, I got an email back directly from Lips. There was no website manager. This website did not need a manager. And the email was like, Teabag, which was my Anvil name. We thought you died or became a lawyer. And I was like, well, both sort of happened. I went to law school and nearly died for another reason, but so he flew out to LA, Lips, and I picked him up at LAX. I got him a ticket to come the following weekend. And he was like, hey man, how you doing? And he was like, as he is in the movie, he was like so filled with enthusiasm. And he's like, yeah, we're doing these songs for this new record. And he was wearing the same Scorpions t-shirt that I'd last seen him in 24 years before. He was literally wearing that.
It's not an exaggeration. It's not an exaggeration.
It was like nothing had changed. I was like, what is going on? I took him to my good friend Steve Zalian, the screenwriter, who had actually been the one that introduced me to Steven Spielberg and began my career. So I took Lips, this crazy Canadian headbanger, over to my friend Steve's place. And him, Lips, I remember I was making coffee with Steve and looking through the window of his kind of kitchen out into the garden just by the ocean. And Lips was there with Steve's wife, Elizabeth. And he was going, yeah, man, we're going to do this record. And, this is Anvil. And she was like looking slightly frightened. But, he was so enthusiastic and sweet. And Steve said, tell me who this guy is that you brought to my house. And I told him the story. I was a roadie. And, he said, my God, and these guys are still going for it. And I'm like, yes, they're still going for it. He said, he's a very interesting character. Maybe there's a film there. And I was like, yeah, what are you talking about? So anyway, that germinated the idea where Steve just thought, he noticed there was something about this guy and about the themes of this story about never giving up when basically you should have, as you said. And it was just something like that happened. And it took me a couple of months, and I went to the Toronto Film Festival, and I was with Rebecca Yelder, my producer, who came in to produce the movie, who had done Motorcycle Diaries and The Kite Runner. And, she'd also been a programmer at Sundance. Brilliant producer. She had a film there, I think. I can't remember. But so she went to meet Anvil with me. She said, well, I hate heavy metal, but let me meet these guys. Let's just see what happens. So she was like, they're incredible. She just thought they were so larger than life, such extraordinary characters. And she took us to this restaurant, and then Lips started crying when he got the menu. And Rebecca's like, are you okay? And Lips was like, yeah, well, I delivered fish to this restaurant for 9 years, and this is the first time I've ever had a meal upstairs.
Oh my God.
And Rebecca was like, oh my God. So she was like, okay, I get it. Okay. And so that began the adventure of, okay, let's just go make this movie. We'll put a crew together. I put an amazing crew. I had Chris Seuss, fantastic DP. I had Matt Dennis. I had incredible editors, Jeff Renfro and Andrew Dickler, who really became my creative partner, is absolutely brilliant. He also cut Palm Springs, by the way, like a brilliant editor. He came in, did a fantastic job. And we just made this movie at my kitchen table. And for 2 years, we traveled around the world, and no one was going to give me the money to it. I remember going to my agents at the time, and they were like, so you don't want to do the Jim Carrey rewrite. You want to do a self-financed documentary about an unknown Canadian heavy metal band. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay. And I was, but they didn't get it. That's so important that if you have an artistic instinct, expect that no one is going to support it. Expect that everyone's going to think you're crazy. But I kind of knew in myself I had to make the movie. And it was a huge risk. There's no way I can go into a room in Hollywood and pitch that story. No one's going to care, because I didn't even know, was there an ending? What is it? It's like, if I think of one of my favorite movies of all time, if I was to go and pitch it in a room, it's 2 unemployed actors go to Wales for the weekend. That's With Nail and I. It's one of the greatest British films ever made, right? It's who those people are in those circumstances. It's the comedy, it's the pathos, it's the story of male bonding. It's a story of ultimately success and failure in a certain kind of way. Once one moves on, the other is stuck. So it's just all about the specifics of what that is. And there was no way, so I had to finance the movie myself. So I did, and I got these rewrite jobs, and I was just like, for the 2 years, just editing at my house and trying to put it together. And then even when we went to Sundance, right? It was 2008. It was the bottom of the documentary market. It was basically the bottom of the market. It was a bad time, as everyone remembers 2008 to be. People loved the movie. No one wanted to buy it. So we had one offer from the UK. They were absolutely mad for it, as they still are to this day. This crazy company called The Works. They offered us, they bought the movie for the UK for a big enough sum that we were able to kind of get some of the money back. And then I got offered this big DVD deal for the States. And I was like, I'm not going to do it, man. I've seen this movie play now at Sundance, at Hot Docs, at all these festivals, and the audience loves it. I've got to get it in front of them somehow. So in the end, I was like, I hired this brilliant guy called Richard Abramovitz, who's actually also involved in the re-release, Abramorama. And we sort of put it together. And we released, I just took out a mortgage on my house, which is, by the way, insane. And I would absolutely
advise not to do this.
No one else to do this, because it was completely mad. Because me and the band were at the same thing, that we were all on the edge. I had everything I'd ever earned was in this movie, everything. Wow. Because I was that crazy about it. But it wasn't just delusion. It was like I'd seen the movie play, and I knew how audiences reacted. So I was just kind of trusting that. I just like somehow, some way, we got to get it to the audience. So we released the movie into 10 cities, and it's because it's in the last 13 years since it's released, it's just gone on and on, to the point where, Alex, and you're right at the epicenter of this, the movie's being re-released into theaters again. So on September 27th of 2022, which is 2-3 weeks from now, the movie goes out into 215 theaters, which is 6 times the size of the original release.
Oh my God. I'm laughing because of the insanity.
It's insane. I mean, it's just crazy.
Okay, all right. So before we get to the release, which is ridiculous. All right, so and I love that story so much, because it really does truly show. And you both were basically at the same place. Yeah, you had some success. But you were putting it all on the line. You're like turning down
everything on the line. And that's another thing, is that if you want to progress in life, I think in general, and you'll know this too, you've got to take some risk. And you've got to know what that risk is and what moment to take that risk.
Right. And
it was like I put everything on 22 Black. And if it hadn't come up, I don't know where I'd be. Because honestly, I just knew, I just had this instinct. I just knew I just had to trust what I saw with my own eyes and ears, with the audiences who were responding. And when you came to that first screening, I mean, what did you think the response was from the audience?
I mean, it was insane. Everybody, like most of the people there hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
And everybody was, crying and laughing. And, when you first watch that movie, the first part, you're just kind of laughing. You're like, these guys are like, they act clownish. They're kind of ridiculous, if not fully ridiculous. Yeah. But then as the movie progresses, you start to connect with them at a deeper level. So at first there's the spectacle, oh, look, ha, 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 look at these losers. They're not going anywhere. But then when you start going in the arc of the hero's journey, if you will, that arc, you start going like, but they're not stopping. This is not funny anymore. Yeah. Because they're serious. They're not morons. They're not idiots. They're not people who, they're just passionate. Might be misplaced passion, but right. But passion nevertheless.
That's exactly. Well, you're exactly. That's exactly the journey of the movie. And I explained this to the band at the beginning. I said, look, for this movie to work, I'm going to have to be 100% honest with you, and you're going to have to trust me a bit. But the reality is, I'm going to encourage the audience to laugh at you at the beginning.
Yes.
Number one, you're fucking hilarious. Okay. let's just face that. Number two, I think the audience will go from a place of laughing at you to recognizing underneath the passion and the perseverance that you were talking about. By the end, they're going to really admire you. And I said, to make that journey, tonally is so complex from step to step to step, because this is literally a movie that has a guy playing a red flying V with a dildo in a bondage harness, right? That's in the movie. And also the Holocaust is in the movie, because Rob Reiner is the survivor, is the son of a survivor.
Correct.
So, of Auschwitz. So when you've got such crazy extremity in the film, you have to build that tonal journey little by little, and I explained that to them. And I think they really appreciated it, because after that, they really trusted me. And I said to them, if there's anything in the film that you really, really object to, I'll take it out. I don't want to put you in a situation where you feel uncomfortable. And It was because I'd been their fan and their roadie that they knew that, and they knew I was telling the truth, that they trusted me. And I think that's a big thing. The reason the movie works is it's so intimate, because it's about me with my friends in the most sort of intimate, private moments that go on behind the scenes, as it turns out, with many bands. Mm-hmm. And actually, when Metallica saw the movie, Lars called me up and said, and he's in the movie Lars Ulrich, and he said, me and the boys watched Anvil on the jet drinking champagne, and we were all in tears because that could have been us. And, it's a very truthful, intimate film.
And by the way, what Lars says is absolutely true, because it's not that they didn't have the talent to do what they're doing. It's that the chips fall where they fall for certain people in certain groups. And sometimes there's that one thing that happens that they're like, oh, you opened up for this one band, and that one person was in the audience that then booked you on a tour, and it just goes on. There's so much luck that's involved.
So much luck. And I think any artist knows that if they're successful or they have some luck, it's about so many things, but you can't have the luck if you don't persevere, if you don't keep going.
Absolutely.
But that said, we all know this. I mean, look around at the world right now. Life is not fair, and life makes no sense. Why is it we have, a war in the Ukraine? Why is it that people who are
pandemic
impacted by the energy crisis so disparately unfair? Why is it that, the lower income households are having to pay more? The world is so unfair. So you have to factor in the fact that so many factors are involved in why someone has a successful artistic career and why someone doesn't, and that you can't control all the elements, and you just have to do your best and give everything you can. But one thing I do know is that if you don't give up,
something will happen.
There's a possibility that something happens. And that's exactly what happens at the end of the Anvil movie. So it's important. It's like, if you're doing everything you can, you're doing everything you can. But just trust the universe that if you're doing the right thing for the right reasons, somehow, somewhere you get rewarded. Somehow, somewhere.
And people always ask me, and this is just, I'll throw my journey in here for a second, is that when I started podcasting in 2015, I just showed up every day. And I did 2 episodes a week, like nobody else. And there was no money. There was nothing. Right. It was just kind of like, I'm just going to show up and pound the stone, cut wood, carry water, pound the stone, cut wood, carry water. That's all I did. And then people were like, oh, well, you got Oliver Stone. Oliver Stone was episode 425.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just so you understand, like,
yeah.
Before then, I was like, and then after Oliver showed up, then a lot of doors opened up, and then people like yourself and other guests started coming up, and then it became what it's become now. But that was episode 425. I did 425 other episodes without any major Oscar winners or, any major, people other than filmmakers just grinding it in and out.
I mean, look, it's like the same example in my case, with The Terminal. It wasn't the first screenplay I ever wrote. It was probably the 30th. And it all came down to when I was at, or the 25th or whatever. It all came down to when I was at film school. I could not finish a script. At the end of my first year at UCLA at the MFA screenwriting program, the head of the program came to me and he said, look, you got to finish this script. And I was like, I can't, it's not good enough. Blah, blah, blah. He said, if you don't finish this script, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to consider leaving the program, because that's what we're here to do. And I was like, but it's going to be terrible. It's horrible. And he said, it doesn't matter. You just have to finish it. And so I finished the script, and it was indeed absolutely unreadably awful. It was terrible. But, he congratulated me. He said, you finished it. And he said, you've got to allow yourself to be bad before you even have the possibility of being good. So many of us are like, I've got this idea and I've got to protect myself legally because this first idea I've had is good. It's a process. It's like, you've got to write a lot of scripts before you start to get the hang of it. It's like riding a bike. You don't just get on it and you win the Tour de France. You've got to get on and work and be in a process. You've got to go to the gym. You've got to write some terrible scripts. You've got to have some heartache. You've got to not be able to finish a script. You've got to, it's such a part of earning that success. Failure is such a critical component, I think, to success. You have to be able to embrace it, to learn from it, to be willing to go through the experience of what it feels like to be a failure. I've done that a lot, and I will do it again. That's just life. And I think, people just imagine, I remember at film school at UCLA, it was, oh, I've got to get an agent. Like, getting an agent was like this magical solution. It's irrelevant. Someone said to me, there's a reason why you're 90% and they're 10%. It's just a little piece of connector, a sort of connective tissue that helps you get into the industry or whatever. But it's the script, it's the work, it's the thing you're doing that is going to get you the agent. The agent doesn't have any power to make a screenplay well written or to make a story well told. They're just, servants of the business, right? So I just think it's interesting. It's important for people to bear in mind that it's a long journey to get anywhere at anything, whether it's screenwriting or violin or doing pottery or
being a heavy metal band,
or being in a heavy metal band or designing maps or whatever it is that you do. The people who are good at it did not get good at it by snapping their fingers. It's a real commitment.
And for people listening too, like, because now we're in a different generation now, different time in history where YouTubers and everybody wants to be famous and everybody wants to do this. And then everyone looks at someone like Mr. Beast, who has 100 million subscribers. And he said it, he's like, the first 10 years, the first 10 years, I barely made it.
Yeah, totally.
Because it takes a long time. So, and that's what film schools don't want to teach you. They don't want to, who's going to buy that product? Hey, we're going to teach you something that's going to take you about 10 years to make a living at it. Like, it's horrible marketing, without question. Okay, so
yes, but anyway, so now you want to go to the present moment, Alex?
So let's go to the present. So let's go to the present moment of Anvil. So I go over. I'm going to tell you the story from my point of view.
Remind me of the madness that ensued. I'm having oatmeal. Please forgive me.
So we are. So I go over, see the movie for the first time. And the audience is fantastic in your screening room, which is a whole other. Your screening room was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's Al Pacino's screening room in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I quickly tell you, Quentin Tarantino came to the house. He said, "I need to use this room for my movie." My wife was like, "Absolutely not. I'm not. We make movies. We're not having a film crew anywhere near this house." Anyway. So I made this deal with Quentin, which is like, if we let you use this room, because it's a real 35 room that he wanted, I need a 35 print of Once Upon a Time in America.
Or Hollywood, yeah.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he gave me one. He was amazing. And
I remember the day you got it, you called me up, you're like, do you want to come see it?
You want to come see it? And it can only be shown in that room. And it's like, but the point being that he was so cool about it. And I was like, okay, if he wants this room, then I want to print the finished movie, and he was amazing about it. But when it came to getting the print, this is a side story. They're so kind of, these prints are like gold, like we keep it in a vault because you have to keep it under security. And all the paperwork, all the Sony people, and like Tom Rothman, head of Sony, had to like approve this print was given, and Rothman was like, why is this guy getting the print? Like Quentin had to go, no, we agreed. Anyway, I got the print, but it was like getting something out of Fort Knox. It was unbelievable.
I didn't know it was that big of a deal, but I guess it does make sense. Yeah.
They made so few of them, and they struck a print, and they gave me this print. And anyway, so thank you, Quentin, if he happens to be listening.
So anyway, I go see that movie. And then, by the way, for people, when I'm in the room, there's a bunch of very cool looking older gentlemen in the room. Like older gentlemen that should not look as cool as they looked. And then you're
top, like who were they?
No, I'm walking in there and you're like, oh, that's Culture Club.
Oh yeah.
It's no Boy George. Boy George wasn't there with you, but it was Culture Club. And and he works for Rod Stewart. And I'm like, this makes more sense.
David Palmer, the drummer of Rod Stewart, and we had Jim James, who was the lead singer of My Morning Jacket, and all these kind of musos wanted to see the movie. Yeah.
Right. So we see it then, and then like a few weeks later, you call me up like, hey, we're having another screening of Anvil. Do you want to come over? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I got to see Anvil again. I have no problem. So let's go back over. And we watched the movie again with a new audience inside the screening room. And then at the end of the screening room, I pulled you aside and I said, I want you to come back on the show just to talk about Anvil, because I feel it's a movie that needs to be talked about in today's world, because it's such a great message. And I think so many people need to hear the message of Anvil. And I go, oh, by the way, I'm working with this distribution company who's a friend of mine, and we're trying to put some stuff together. Would you be interested in re-releasing this? And that's how the conversation, that was the germ of the idea. And then you went off and you're like, It's a 15-year-old. I'm like, yeah, we'll do like a 15-year release party. Like we'll do a small thing, this and that. And then that's how the whole idea started. And then of course, and then that revved, like that germ of an idea revved up very quickly in your head.
I know. And then in the end, I mean, it was just crazy. And I mean, the whole thing, these screenings began really with my godson, Rio, who's 17. And his mother Rebecca produced the movie. And so Rebecca and I had made this film, and Rio was, 6, 7, 8 years old. So last summer, he said to me, look, because I'm his godfather, he said, I'd love to see that movie you and Mom made, all those years ago, because I was a kid. So I said, sure, I'll show it. I invited him, and he brought all these friends from high school.
Yeah.
And the whole thing began because he brought all these kids to see this movie none of them had heard of, obviously, apart from Rio. And they went nuts for the film. And we were like, what is going on? This is like a 13-year-old documentary. And these kids have never heard of it, and they're vibing with it. And it was post-COVID. And it was just landing this story about two best friends never giving up on a dream. It just really resonated with them. So that's where you and I started talking. And then I started talking with these guys at Utopia. And it was astonishing, that this screening that began, let me show my godson this movie that I made with his mum, that ended with offers from 2 separate distributors to bring it back out and to restore the film. So
to restore the film, to bring it back out. And the thing that's so fascinating to me, and we keep joking about this because Utopia is run by a friend of the show, Rob. Rob, who was on the show before. And I keep telling you, every time I talk to him, like, Rob knows this movie was released 13 years ago. Like he understands this is not a new movie.
Well, this is the thing, because they've really gone for it. And we have 2 large billboards on Sunset.
What?
And so people are calling us up going, sorry, this movie was released before, but the great thing is they're acting like it hasn't been, because to the audience they want to get, they've never even heard of this film, a lot of them. So now they've just gone for it. And it's, as I said, Richard Abramovitz, who released the movie the first time around, Utopia's brought him in. And it goes to, I think the current count is like 215 or 17 screens at the end of this month. I mean, yeah. And so we're doing this big event in LA on the 22nd at the Saban Theater, where we're showing the restored movie on a giant screen in front of 1,200 people. And then the band is going to come out and play at the end. And we have Scott Ian from Anthrax and many other, luminaries coming out to jam with them. It's going to be complete madness. And then New York next Tuesday, we've sold out the Angelica with Peter Dinklage as the host. And, it's crazy. It's all happening again around this movie that it's just it's got this magical energy, this film, and
this is unprecedented. It's
never been done. It's
never been done.
Theatrical re-release of a documentary I think, because since Anvil came out, you've had all these incredible movies like Searching for Sugar Man and Amy and 20 Feet from Stardom. In fact, one of the things that happened with Anvil was, it didn't get longlisted for an Academy Award due to the voting procedure. They changed the voting rules actually in the Academy in the doc branch as regards music documentaries because of Anvil, because so many people were upset that it got some amazing recognition. But as a result, when Searching for Sugar Man won the Academy Award, 2 years or 3 years after Anvil came out, Simon Chin, the producer, who's a good friend, called me up and said thank you to Anvil, because had the rules not changed, we never would have been in the situation to even win in the first place. So Anvil came ahead of this sort of the Amy, Sugar Man, 20 Feet from Stardom thing, and it was considered, I guess, reasonably influential. So I think that it's one of those movies which changed the paradigm a little, and so I think that's one of the other reasons why it's being re-released again, because it was sort of before all this this recent kind of rise of documentaries, particularly music documentaries.
I'm fascinated to see how it does. I am absolutely fascinated to see
Me too.
The numbers are going to be. Wouldn't it be crazy if this starts to turn into something? Who
knows? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it already has. I mean,
you won. No, you've won, Sacha.
It's already being re-released. I mean, I'm going to the Grove to do a Q&A in LA, which is a pretty big theater. And our premiere is twice the size of the original premiere. I can't even. We had an amazing premiere at the Egyptian. Cinema. Yeah, we did that, but this place is with the band too, and it's twice the size. So
and there's going to be a few, and there's going to be a few fans there. And that's the thing that's too, is like, you have fans of this film, like some of the biggest movie stars in the world, some of the biggest rock bands in the world. They're huge fans of this. Well,
it's just really, I mean, they relate to it. I mean,
any artist does.
I was at a screening in London. It's really interesting. I was at a screening in London a year and a half ago, and it was like Gillian Anderson from the X-Files, you know, obviously many other things, Margot Robbie, Olivia Colman, Boy George, I mean, Lulu, who's a famous singer from the 60s in England, who's brilliant, To Sir With Love. They all went nuts for this movie. So I don't really know how to explain it. There's just something about it where people recognize something.
So I have to ask you, Rob and Lips and Rob, who are the two stars of this opus, what did they think about this? Because I was there. I think it was Lips that popped up one of our original Zoom meetings. I got to see Lips. When you called them back up and go, "Hey boys, we're doing a massive re-release of Anvil theatrically around the around America."
Yeah, around the world. By the way, Britain is bringing it back too.
Obviously.
So Altitude, who released Searching for Sugar Man, actually are re-releasing it into theaters in the UK. We've just done a deal with Australia. It's going back around the world again in this new restored version.
So what did they say when you called them about this?
They were just like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" I'm like, "I don't really know."
Like, this is the end. We had our run. 13. We're good. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. I didn't think it took them quite some time to believe it until actually recently, and this is another thing going on right now. They started talking in the UK about Anvil, the film, and the band playing the Royal Albert Hall together.
Oh, wow.
So I think that was what really went. Lips was like, oh, we're gonna maybe do the Royal Albert Hall. Okay. He started freaking out about that. I think it was just a bit like, it's this very unusual thing, but it's like Top Gun, you know what I mean? Top Gun Maverick. Over the years of Top Gun, I mean, this is obviously not on the same scale. I'm not that deluded, but you know,
could you imagine?
I want to see Top Gun Maverick and Anvil, Story of Anvil double bill, the feel-good hits of the year. But the point being that over the years, like everyone loves Top Gun, and so I think what's happened with Anvil is that people have found the film over the years. Obviously, at 0.1% of the scale of Top Gun, but there is a fondness and a love for that film, which seems to have grown, and so it's exciting because you just never know, man, what's going to happen. Like, I would never have predicted that 13 years after the original release, there'd be a release, you know, 4 or 5 times that size, and the band is still here. They're still doing it. They've done 6 albums since. You know, it's
and look at all of the elements the universe put together for this to happen. I invited you on a podcast.
That's right.
We became friends.
Yeah.
Then I go to a screening. We talk. The kids had to come, and you saw that reaction. We have this guy. Like, there's so many parts that had to fall into place for this to be released. And then you found Utopia, who's insane, and I still say they're insane. I wish them all the best. But they're absolutely. You just showed me pictures of the billboards. So I'm like, what?
We have
a building.
No, building. We have half the building covered in Anvil, and then we have above Gil Turner's on Sunset. For those who know LA, I mean, it's like one of the prime spots at the intersection of Sunset and Doheny. For the entire month, we have an Anvil billboard standing alone. And it's like people are calling up, but they're laughing because they're like it's making people laugh. I love that. That it's just, we are the underdog story. Like, you've got the Anvil billboard, and then you've got, like, you know, Euphoria season 2, or, you know, Lord of the Rings, the Power of the Rings sequel, or whatever. I mean, just people are laughing. It's because it's ridiculous. But that's sort of part of what Anvil is the absurdity, the you know, the little engine that could madness that this film has always had. And so I kind of love the fact that Robert and Utopia are acting as if it hasn't been released before.
God bless him, man. God bless him. And you've been kind enough to give 2 free tickets
to the big premiere in LA. It's going to be
the big premiere in LA, which I'm going to, if you guys are interested in,
we're going to be there.
I'm going to be there. I'm flying out from Austin to go just specifically to go see it.
Amazing.
Again, and to hang with you guys. But we're going to be
Alex, it'll be you and me and the ticket winners in a 1,500 or 1,200 seat auditorium with Anvil. But the great thing is, they'll give the best show of their lives. If there's 4 of us, it won't matter. They'll play it like Giant Stadium.
That's as the movie has showed, because we saw some of those.
I know.
In the pub with in the pub in the trailer. If you guys just watch the trailer in the show notes, you'll just see like they're in a pub and there's just like the one dude in a chair like this, and right next to Rob, because it's such a small venue that Rob is like literally bumping into the guy in the chair.
I mean,
but they're going hard. They're
going hard because that's their point. Is that it doesn't matter if there's 1 person or 1 million people in the audience. They go for it. They still give the same show.
And the lessons that this film can teach all of us as filmmakers, as screenwriters, as artists, as people in general of what we're trying to do in life. It's so valuable. That's what I saw in the film. That's why I brought that idea up to you. And like, we got to get this out. I want people to know about this story because God, it's just such a ridiculous, wonderful, touching, insane story that will uplift and make you laugh. It'll make you cry. I mean, it's Top Gun. Let's just call it. It's Top Gun Maverick.
I'll send you. I actually got Alex. I'm going to send this to you. I actually got when I was on the road with Anvil at the time, right? I actually took a break in one of the tours in '86 to go to a family bar mitzvah. And so there's this film that my cousin unearthed, which has been digitized, which is, I really want to send you because I wish you would put it in your notes. Let me see if I can find it. Hold on, I'll find it.
Oh my God, send it to me. I'll put it on the notes. Absolutely.
It's just complete madness, dude. It's just hold on 1 second. But anyway, so I'm feeling like really quite encouraged by the response so far. Yeah. And you know, whatever happens, it's gravy. You know what I mean? It's just like, does it matter?
It doesn't matter. But the thing is, look, I'm just happy to be a very, very small part.
You had a big part in it, dude. It was good.
I'm just glad to be any part of this release, and that, I mean, my God, I hope it can make 1% of what Top Gun did.
Shall I show you this thing? So my cousin, when I was on tour with Anvil, shot this video in 1986, and it's going to go onto TikTok. I'm just going to play this in your screen. Hold on.
Sure. By the way, Anvil are a fucking good rock band, and if you don't buy the new album, then kiss my.
Holy cow! Is that who I think it is?
It's me. So I'm going to send this to you. So you can
send it. I'll put it up. I'll post it on social media. It's going to be great.
This is when I was like 17 or 16 or whatever. So I'm going to send this to you, Alex. And it's one of the TikTok things we're doing. Again, it's all being marketed in a completely different way, right?
It's just insane. This is a case that, listen, if it makes $1 billion, hell, if it makes $100 million,
if it makes $100.
If it makes $100, I need you to come back on the show. I need you to come back on the show, and we have to talk about what happened afterwards.
I'm happy to do anything.
This is the ever-ending story.
Even if it makes enough money for you and I to have dinner at Soup Plantation, I'll be thrilled. You can have anything on the left side of the menu. I have a coupon. It's going to be great.
Sacha, man. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. I ask all my guests because I think for this episode, I think it really makes sense. What advice would you give a filmmaker or screenwriter or anybody trying to follow their dreams, trying to get to where they want to go?
I think the thing to do for me is to try and find a way to filter out other people's opinions, because a parent will have an opinion, or a friend, or that will never work. You know, people can throw kind of wet blankets on what may be great ideas. So I think it's just being quite determined to just be true to what you know to be true. Like I said, you know, with Anvil, everyone was like, this will never work. Literally, people would say, this will never work. It's self-financed. You're being crazy. Who's going to watch this movie? You know, and here we are 13 years later with the second release of the film. So it's just, you got to trust your own instinct. Just know what you know, and expect that other people will not support it, or frankly, even understand it, because only you know what you need to do. So that's, I think, one big aspect of it, because there's no trick, there's no secret. It all comes down to the movie or the script. It all comes down to the quality of the work. And that comes from your own authenticity with yourself, your own kind of like, okay, this makes me laugh or this makes me cry, or I feel something around this story. Just trust your own feelings around your story. I mean, I knew with Anvil, I just knew there was something good about it. Like, you can't tell me that it's not commercial. You can't tell me. You may be right. I don't give a shit what you're saying. What I'm focused on is I know there's something special here. And just, and don't doubt your instinct. So that's the thing I would say is do not doubt your own private instinct about what it is.
Now, what did you learn from your biggest failure?
I've learned not to make a movie if the circumstance is not right. I was forced into making a movie, I chose to make a movie where I knew it was super risky for various different reasons because of the producers and financiers that were involved. And I loved the material, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to go make this movie and screw it, and everything will be okay. If you know at the beginning of a process, if you see red flags and you ignore them, which I did, ignore that at your peril, because things only ever get worse. And the other thing was like with a crew member on a movie, it's like, I knew I had a problem with a particular crew member. I didn't fire them because I thought, oh, this will be too much. I really regretted that decision. As Alexander Payne always says, fire quick, fire early. As soon as you see a problem, that problem is not going to go away. It will magnify and amplify. So I guess my piece of advice is do not ignore red flags. And also, having failures though is how you learn the lessons. You learn the lessons through having the failures. So even if you do have a failure, it's okay. It's all about, that old thing is like, if you get knocked down 6 times, the most important thing is you get up the 7th time. It doesn't really matter. You just got to keep getting up. So that sort of not refusal to give in. You got to train yourself, because often you're going to be on your own. I mean, you mentioned Oliver Stone. I mean, the stuff that man has been through to get his films made, the determination, the kind of hardcore, full force, like people telling him like, this is a crazy movie and you're anti-American and blah, blah, but he knew, man, he knew what he needed to do and he just did it. And there's a certain relentlessness that I think is required. Like, just don't get caught up in other people's opinions, because everyone is not going to see what you see and everyone's not necessarily going to believe in you. So I'm, quite a sensitive person. I think most creative artists are, but you've got to have a sensitive side as it regards the work, but you've got to develop this warrior side. And I needed to develop that. And thankfully I have had failures, and that helped me to develop those things, to be able to look failure in the face and go, okay, I'm going to avoid that now. So I'm not going to avoid that red flag. So when a crew member's doing this kind of shit early, get rid of them. Just deal with them. Just pull the Band-Aid now and deal with the pain. Don't put off dealing with situations. That was a big lesson that I needed to learn. And I learned it, but I learned it the hard way. And I think most people will learn their lessons the hard way, right? It's very, what is it? What is that great thing? A wise man learns, A wise man learns mistakes from others. A genius learns them from himself, or something. I can't remember.
Something along
those lines. But whatever it is, right? It's like you have to earn it yourself. All the wisdom's out there. We know all the facts we need to know, but you got to, track down your road on your own and just learn. And being a creative artist or a filmmaker, it's a wonderful business. It's also a lonely business. You got to realize that. And, family members and people are just not necessarily going to understand, and you have to be cool with that. But anyway, it is what it is. It's also the most wonderful thing in the world. If you do get through the battlefield and you do make a film and you do feel good about it, and you sit in an audience, with people, and you watch people listen and hear and respond to the ideas that you were trying to put into that movie, it's just so beautiful, because you feel connected with complete strangers. It's extraordinary. It's like I was able to get an amazing print of ET and play it, and I got this fantastic print, and I was play it, at my house with some filmmaker friends, and we were all in tears at the end. It's like the ability that Spielberg has to reach people's hearts, when he's working at his best, which is quite often, to be able to reach people's hearts and connect everyone around this notion, in that case, of sort of family and home, and that's a powerful spiritual skill to possess and to be able to deploy to bring people closer together. That's the whole idea of, for me, the stories and films, is to bring people closer together.
I have to ask you, did Stevens ever see Anvil?
I think he has. I didn't. I actually have to invite him to the premiere. I think it's but I know that lots of people, I mean, some incredible people are already coming, some quite famous actors, actually. But yes, I think he may have. I think he may. I mean, heavy metal, I'm not sure heavy metal thing.
From what I understand since talking to so many people who've worked with him, he's that kind of guy. He will watch
everything. He watches everything. Yeah,
everything, and he'll write you a little note. He'll go.
And I got from Tom Hanks. I got an incredible note about Anvil. So,
did you? That's amazing. And last question, sir. 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Oh my God. Okay, Sweet Smell of Success, Alexander McKendrick, 1957. James Wong Howe, brilliant photography. Burt Lancaster, Tony Curtis. Ben Hecht, Clifford Odets screenplay. Unbelievable, the greatest of the New York movies. There's something so raw and visceral. And Burt Lancaster as J.J. Hunsaker is one of the great on-screen performances opposite Tony Curtis. And I love that movie. It's about power and moral corruption and desperation and, New York. And it's just such a great film. So I'd recommend that. With Nail and I recommended before, which is the great Bruce Robinson, who was Academy Award nominated for Killing Fields, wrote and directed with Nail and I. Absolutely brilliant writer, brilliant filmmaker. I love that. And Chinatown, which is one of my favorite films of all time. Extraordinary Robert Towne script, Polanski at his best, Nicholson at his best. Just a brilliant film. You can go back, and those are movies that you can go back and watch multiple times. And each time you watch it, you discover something new or have a different experience, or you see it through the prism of whatever is going on in your life at that moment. Those are the great films, are the ones that you can watch when you're 10, 20, 30, 50, and they still work. And there's still something interesting, new, and exciting about them. And those are the classic films. So those are, like, off the top of my head. Sweet Smell, With Nail, and Chinatown are probably 3 of my favorite films. Also, I have to say I love Remains of the Day. Anthony Hopkins' best performance. It's a beautiful script.
Ivory, yeah.
Most of which actually was written by Harold Pinter, though he refused to take credit for the screenplay. Emma Thompson at her best, Hopkins, I think, in his best performance, and James Ivory was the best Merchant Ivory film to me. So I would recommend people watch Remains of the Day. It's just, the script is structured in such a truly extraordinary, simple, brilliant, and effective way. It's such an emotional film because it's about unfulfilled yearning. Yearning is one of the most powerful human emotions for me. It's like, particularly when it's unfulfilled. In the case of a man, Stevens, played by Hopkins, who cannot express himself. He cannot say, I love you. And there's such pathos in that, and power, because love is there if only you'll have the courage to reach out and grab it. I love that film. So that's one of my favorites. I have a print of that. I actually have 2 prints of Remains of the Day, which I watch pretty regularly.
And that is also a theme of Anvil. Are you brave enough to go out and grab what you want in life? And if they don't give it to you right away, are you willing to spend the next 30 years working in dive bars trying to figure it out until that 15-year-old roadie calls you up who made it in Hollywood and said, hey, you want to make a documentary? And then 15 years later, call them up. Hey, we're going to re-release that.
By the way, it's being re-released. I would also urge anyone who's interested in the Anvil story to look up one of the albums they did since the movie. The album is called Anvil is Anvil. And Rob Reiner, the drummer, who's also a painter, as you'll see in the film, he actually drew an oil painting of an anvil staring at itself in a mirror. And the album's called Anvil is Anvil. When I saw this cover, I called up Rob Reiner. I said, dude, how flipping high were you? And he said, pretty high. He said, don't you think it's great? And I said, actually, I do. It doesn't get any deeper than Anvil is Anvil.
By the way, if you guys get a chance, the album covers for the 19 albums that they've done are brilliant.
They all feature an anvil. All the titles are, sort of the alliterate: metal on metal, forged in fire, strength of steel, pound for pound, whatever. It's madness. Go and see Anvil. But most importantly, can I suggest that if people want to see the movie, they should see the restored movie on the big screen. There's an interview with us afterwards and some bonus footage. And it's nationwide, September the 27th. Go to anvilthefilm.com to get tickets. And you'll see it's across the country and Canada. and I really hope that people go and see it and take their friends, because I think what you will have is a really good time.
There's no question. And I don't even like heavy metal, and I love this film without question.
And it's also like Helen Mirren's loves this movie. It's one of her favorite movies.
Of course it is.
You know, she's a little rock and roller, really. The reason I got the job directing Tony Hopkins in Hitchcock was because he loved Anvil. He and his wife have seen it 3 times. He loves Anvil. I think it just reaches you. So check it out. If you really hate the movie, you write to Alex. He'll send him. I will give you a money back guarantee.
Don't say that.
Send you the money. I just don't. If you really hate this movie, guess what? You deserve to have your money back. I will send it to you.
I appreciate that, and I'll put information about the giveaway for those 2 free tickets for the LA premiere on the, what date is it again? September
22nd, and then nationwide in theaters the 27th, 5 days later.
My friend, it is a joy having you on the show. You're always welcome back whenever you want. It's just such a wonderful. I'm so glad that we're able to put this out into the world.
Thank you, and thank you. I should say for your audience, thank you, Alex Ferrari, because you were like the little seed that planted the whole idea. When you said you should bring this out into theaters again, I was like, what the hell are you talking about?
Are you high, Alex? Have I?
You suggested it, man. So I want to thank you.
It's all my fault. So if it wins, it's my fault. If it's a lose,
by the way, if you don't like the movie, write to Alex. He'll give you your money back.
No.
I'm not people. Alex,
so you're breaking up. This is a very bad connection now. All of a sudden, Sacha, my friend, it is a pleasure as always. Good luck to you, and please come back and let us know how it comes. I
will let you know. I'll see you at the premiere. It'll just be me, you, and Anvil in a giant auditorium, but we'll have the time of our lives.
A pleasure, brother.
Okay, see you soon, guys.